For more on this, we're joined by Executive Director at Firstsource Money, Redge Nkosi, and Unisa's Political Sciences Professor Dirk Kotzé. Good evening to both of you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I want to start with you, Redge, if I may. According to the CEO of the biggest political party in South Africa, the ANC, Fikile Mbalula himself, a former minister, this is much ado about nothing, because these perks aren't really, as hectic as some of us make them out to be.
Well, I suppose Mbalula is entitled to some of such opinions, but quite frankly, the perks are there. They may have been reduced in one way or another, but they remain. And I think it is true that that does contribute to the challenges that we face. This is not to say the contribution of such perks is extraordinary, not at all. It is nonetheless a contributory factor. The cabinet as a whole is quite big, there's no doubt. But again, that's a political choice. Political choices made by parties or those who are in the coalition government, as we see, are sometimes very difficult to reconcile. And we expect somehow, however, that they should understand that such large numbers of cabinet ministers, deputy ministers, and officials accompanying them, that is a large cost that has to be trimmed somehow. And ministries can, in fact, be trimmed, in my view, to save a bit of money. But I'm not saying necessarily that the austerity measures that are being taken by government would in fact end by immediately, shutting down some of these deputy ministerial positions and the people and the staff that come with them. But all I'm saying is, we do need savings in as much as we do need efficiencies in government, which can be obtained through a very tight ship that has to be managed pretty well. In some countries, we just have ministers only. There's no need for deputy ministers. You just have a DG who is a bureaucrat, can easily manage quite well. And this is the many jurisdictions. So for me, if you were to ask, is there necessity to reduce the bureaucracy? Absolutely, especially at ministerial level. You can, in fact, squeeze down the ministries as much as let off some of the deputy ministerial positions. I mean, we do understand some ministries may need deputy minister, but not as much as we have today. But again, I must warn that cutting such positions does not necessarily mean then austerity is going to end, or the contribution of such cuts are going to be dramatic. Not at all. They will nonetheless, help insofar as the cost of government as a whole is concerned.
Prof, the GNU is to blame for what many are calling or refer to as a bloated cabinet. Well, so says Fikile Mbalula, and President Cyril Ramaphosa has said as much repeatedly.
Yes, I think that is the general perception, that because there are 10 parties in the government of national unity, they all had to be accommodated. Some of them only at the level of deputy ministers, one should say. I think where there has been a proliferation of positions is at the level of deputy ministers. So I think that is one area which can, for example, that should receive attention. At the level of ministers, I'm not quite sure whether there is the same level of being too large, or that it has grown exponentially to a large extent. The one thing we have to understand is that I think where the real costs lie is not in the cabinet. It's not with the ministers or even with the deputy ministers. It is with the different departments. So some ministers have more than one department. In the past, for example, there was the Minister of Agriculture and Land Affairs. It's two different departments with its own structure, with its own Director General, Deputy Director Generals, and others, but with one minister and one or two deputy ministers. So if you want to really address the size of the administration, because this is really not government, this is the administration, then it will be more at the level of the departments than at the level of ministries. Because what one can do, if you want to reduce the number of ministries, you can put together more than one department under one minister. But in the end, the number of departments will still remain the same. And if we, for example, now heard that one of the reasons to increase the VAT, value-added tax, is in order to deal with the salaries of the public sector. And I think this is therefore the main focus will be there. It's many more thousands of people who are in the public sector, in the public service, than those politicians who are members of cabinet. I think we should also take into account that there's a distinction between the executive, which is the ministers and the deputy ministers, and the public service or the public administration, who are not doing executive functions. So if you cut on the executive side, then some of the departments who still need an executive head or political head will have to be accommodated in some other way in the new system or dispensation.
But let me ask you this, Reg, I hear what Prof says, but for the size of our economy and population, do we really need the ministers or the number of ministers that we have? And when it comes to deputies who don't even have executive powers, do we even need them at all? I can only think of one deputy minister who has a, shall we say, real job, which is the minister or the deputy minister of finance.
Well, frankly, the possibility or the opportunity does exist to reduce these ministers. Some of these ministries will certainly be in one, and therefore, removing the unneeded minister who is who's been split to do some of these jobs. But again, this is a political decision. In my view, if you look at some countries outside of South Africa, if you look at the OECD, you don't have as many as these ministries here. And the proliferation of staff. But again, it talks to the productivity of staff. It's very, very important, and we have to have the bureaucracy that's very productive. Here we have a bureaucracy that is not productive. It's quite frankly bloated, and I think there is a way in which we can streamline that and achieve better results.
Okay.
Deputy ministerial, as I said earlier, frankly, we can knock quite a few of those out. And it comes with staff, remember, though each one of the deputy ministers has got a contingent of people around him. Those wouldn't necessarily be, of great use, and we can get rid of that. But I want to caution, as I said, that there's possibility for South Africa to reduce these industries. The question is, the number that would come out of these reductions wouldn't be such that it affects the budget in a tremendous way, in such a way as to say we're going to have large savings. I doubt that would be the case. Frankly, not. Therefore, we could be saying we need to cut the ministries or the departments or even the deputy ministerial positions, just because we want to have a lean government that operates efficiently without so many people, some of them doing duplication work that could actually be done by one person. So yes, there is room for squeezing out these ministries out and the deputy ministerial positions, including the ministers themselves. There is sufficient room in my view.
Okay, we are going to talk about, more about the bureaucracy and, of course, some of the areas that only yesterday members of various political parties in Parliament raised as areas that could assist together with cutting down on members of the executive, but also deputy ministers. That coming up in a moment. What did you say was? this a... Okay, can I check? I just want to take one quick question.
Stand by. 8, 7.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, we are in conversation with Redge Nkosi as well as Professor Dirk Kotzé. And among the questions we are trying to answer, or issues we're trying to discuss, is whether in fact what many regard as a bloated executive, together of course with the many deputy ministers that we have, reducing those cannot help in the financial situation that the country finds itself in, which has now forced the finance minister on his account to actually introduce a 0.5% VAT increase in the next year and another 0.5% increase the following year. Now, before I go to callers to hear their views, Prof, I just wanted to finish off on this with regard to the executive, and I include there the deputy ministers. Is it not, or should we rule out what people, some people have said has been the reason in reality for so many ministers and many more deputy ministers, which is that the president couldn't run away from the fact that he had a lot of his comrades who, because other political parties had to be accommodated in the government of national unity, felt the need to accommodate some of his comrades whose noses would have otherwise been out of joint if they were not given at least deputy ministries. Just your comment on that.
Yes, I think there are definitely political considerations in the allocation of the positions of ministers and deputy ministers. That included, I would say, one can start with the ANC and President Ramaphosa. But if we looked at the negotiations that took place and what we heard afterwards of how it was conducted, then the other parties also negotiated for positions. And in some cases, like, for example, the DA were pushing for more seats in cabinet. So it's not as if it was purely an ANC matter. It is something which I think most of the parties became very strong in bargaining for the maximum presence in the cabinet. And I think when it comes to the cabinet itself, to a large extent, that is what happened. Take, for example, the position of the ministry in the past of Agriculture and Land Affairs. The two of them were split, I would say, in order to accommodate, also to have a seat for the PAC, for example, in the cabinet as the Minister of Land Affairs, and then Agriculture for the DA. So this is just one example, but I think when we look at the allocation of positions specifically for deputy ministers, there the ANC is disproportionately represented in those positions, and there is not a type of a proportional representation or distribution there. So I think the focus can definitely be on the deputy ministers when one looks at this argument about also rewarding or accommodating different interests within political parties and specifically the ANC.
In addition to, of course, trimming down the cabinet, deputy ministers, people like Songezo Zibi, who is the chairperson of SCOPA, Reggie, reckons there are other very specific cost-saving measures that could be explored. The amount of cars that the state, across the board get hired. He reckons there are savings that could be achieved there. Your thoughts on that particular thought? It's an issue he raised yesterday after the budget speech by the finance minister.
I think there is merit to that point. As I said earlier, the issue of productivity in our government, or in South Africa in general, is one that should be worrying South Africans themselves. I do not think we're very productive an economy. And to the extent that we're not that productive, quite frankly, we end up actually hiring people that do very little. So there could be indeed some merit in that proposition by Songezo Zibi. But it does take quite a while to get a bureaucracy to be productive. We may consider issues of technologies that have to come in, training has to come in, and so on. But, that is an area that cannot easily be touched, because then you're talking of livelihoods of people already employed who may need to be deployed, or if not, if they're going to be taken out, to be paid large sums of money. I do not think, that is an, issue or it's an area that would quickly jump on and deal with it. But nonetheless, the point is well taken. But I think South Africa suffers from a rather strange approach to governance, both economic and political in a way, that is contributing quite significantly to the challenges that we face right now. The shortage of money that we claim there is in this system arises from the fact that we have adopted a particular model of governance, economic governance, that is quite unique. Unique in the sense that has never, in my view, been recorded in the economic history, that a developing country would go the route of simply increasing taxes and cutting expenditure and so on and so forth, and therefore be able to grow. That is unheard of. In fact, is theoretically very naive. And South Africa, as a consequence of having taken that route, finds itself in this quagmire where some are saying don't increase VAT for political reasons, not that necessarily, like the DA, not that necessarily DA wouldn't want some taxes to be increased. It's a political statement. They would want something else outside of VAT to increase. So we're in this conundrum because we have adopted a regime of governance, both political and economic, that is inconsistent with our level of development and where we're supposed to head to.
Let's take some views of some of our viewers who are watching now. Hopefully we can put them up on the screen. Oh, it's a caller I hear. Let's hear from Thabo in Bloemfontein.
Good evening, Mr. Mboyo.
Yes, Thabo.
How are you?
Well, thanks, and how are you? Go ahead.
I'm fine. I'm saying government, the cabinet is too bloated. We don't have to have the deputy ministers, because even if in the absence of the minister,
Yes, I'm listening. We're listening.
Yes, I'm saying the deputy ministers, they're really not serving any purpose. And the cabinet is too bloated. In the case whereby the minister himself is not available in the country, they will take that portfolio for someone to come and act, not necessarily deputy ministers. So the deputy ministers, their function, what is that? But we don't see any impact on the service delivery. Rather, they must do away with the deputy ministers, and even the provincial government should be done away with, so they can only have national government and local government.
Okay.
Then 9 provinces, there's no need for provincial government, but unnecessary exhibit manual that is spent, and we don't see what is their function. It's too much of bureaucracy.
Thank you for that call. Let's go to Mike in Delmas.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Well, thanks. And how are you, Mike? Please go ahead.
I'm doing well, and thanks for asking. Thabo almost covered what I wanted to say. But in adding to what he has said, that I would say indeed the what you call the government is too. I mean, the cabinet is too bloated, because there's been a call to say some departments should apply cost-cutting measures. So now, when you find them doing contrary to that, so clearly you see that they doesn't walk the talk. So really there's to be some measures that seek to save as much as we can, because really the fiscal deficit and the socio-economic challenges that we are facing as a country doesn't allow us, because most of those deputy ministers, they're just sitting there doing nothing.
Okay.
So really it doesn't make sense when you say to departments such as the SANDF, your SAPS, Department of Education, the Department of Health, they should apply cost-cutting measures.
Okay.
Whereas on top there, they don't have anything that speaks to that.
Mike,
and not ready to walk the talk. So clearly there should be something that is happening, that is done there, that seeks to address the issue of, or that seeks to see that the government they are actually reducing spending.
Thank you, Mike. Mike and Thabo ending that conversation. Special thanks to Redge Nkosi and Professor Dirk Kotzé for enriching this conversation. The question really being, where do we look for cuts? Is cabinet among the areas we should be looking into? Should we be doing away with deputy ministers? And how much of that will result in very real savings? More news after the break.